You are free indeed. That part we really like, right? That's amazing. If Jesus sets you free, you are free. You are free. It's the couple of lines above us that sometimes get us stuck. If you fall into sin, when you commit a sin, you are a slave to sin. And yet we know that faith is a gift, and we are justified through faith. We are justified by faith through grace. The grace-given gift of God, given to us, the gift of faith, that we might know the truth and be set free. Looking back throughout time, there are hundreds of thousands of millions, most likely, or however all those words go together. Math's not my strong suit. Hundreds of millions of thousands, hundreds of thousands of millions, whatever it is. The kids would probably say a Google gazillion or something like that. Quotes about freedom, right? What are the quotes of freedom that quickly come to mind? The truth will set you free. Yeah. Anyone else? Who God sets free is free indeed. Free to be you, free to be me. I watched that movie a lot as a little kid, Free to Be You and Me. With lots of diversity involved. Free bird. All right. There are all sorts of quotes that take the same idea. Maya Angelou said, "The truth is, no one of us can be free until everybody is free." The Song of Freedom. The Song of Freedom is all I've ever had, absolutely. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said it this way: no one is free until we are all free. Fannie Lou Hamer said, nobody's free until everybody's free. And in 1883, Emma Lazarus said, until we are all free, we are none of us free. Some people were free to have a really long weekend, right? Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But not everybody got that freedom. And in the way our society works, it's probably impossible for everybody to have that long weekend, right? Think of hospitals and nursing homes in particular, and all sorts of other places. There's probably no way we could take a full, everybody in the country or everybody in the world gets a 4-day sabbatical on the same 4 days, right? It wouldn't work. If for no other reasons, nursing homes and hospitals. And I'm sure there's all sorts of other essential places that must remain open as well. Imagine the lines to the gas station on Wednesday if everybody had Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. But the truth is, however you want to say it, until we are all free, none of us are free. Martin Luther took a slightly different spin on this, at least in this one quote. He has a whole book on Christian freedom, and he talked about freedom a lot. There are thousands of Martin Luther freedom quotes as well. But a Christian is perfectly free, Lord of all, subject to none. A Christian is a perfectly dutiful servant of all, servant to all. Luther loved doing those both and kind of things, right? We are fully saint, we are fully sinner at the exact same time. Luther says we are totally free and subject to none, while at the same time being the perfectly dutiful servant of all, subject to all. So all the time, we're kind of weaving through life, right? Being free to make choices, and at the same time knowing that our choices often have consequences or always have consequences. And so we're ever mindful of the greater community as well. As Christians, we're perfectly free and fully servant of all. So what's that mean for all means all? Hold on. What's that mean for all means all? How do we live together when we know that we're all free in one way or another, or multiple ways? If we wanted to list the freedoms that we have, I'm guessing we could come up with a really long list, right? But we're in worship, not a workshop. We're not in a training event or a staff retreat or something. So we're not going to make a list of all of the ways that we are free. There's lots of ways we are all free. And there's lots of ways we are all bound to one another. And we're all bound to rules and regulations, right? We're bound, hopefully, to a sense of moral consciousness and some ethics. And so there are choices that we could make that we hopefully wouldn't even think about making because they're just not good choices, right? So what's that mean for us here at All Peoples? How do we practice our freedom in a way that we are both free and servant, and we allow others to be free and servant, and not the other way around? You're servant and then you're free, but you're free first. How do we live that out here at All Peoples? What's that mean for us here? It often means that we have Brian or Daryl at the front door, right? Welcoming people to come in. On Sunday mornings. We have other people standing there sometimes on Wednesdays, usually on Wednesdays, to let people in for pantry as well. One of our pantry rules is we really don't turn anybody away. We prefer that people call in and let us know they're coming, but if they just show up, unless there is a serious fear factor, which, has that ever happened? I'm getting a negative response back there. It's not happened. But that would be the only reason I could imagine that we ever would turn someone away from pantry, right? Is if we could tell that it's going to become aggressive and violent immediately or before pantry is over. We know, as Frederick Douglass did way back in 1852, that our nation and our church has all sorts of wonderful, beautiful promises of freedom, dignity, justice, independence. For some. For way fewer back in Frederick Douglass's day in some ways than today. And yet we still struggle with that, don't we? We still struggle with that, and all you got to do is turn on the news and listen to the political banter back and forth these days. And we know we have not yet achieved that dream that hopeful potential reality that at some point we will truly all be free because everybody is free. It's not true only at the national level that some are not as free as others, but we know that happens even still in the church in many places. We've talked about some of those things. The freedom to worship, the freedom to be able to gather together in community, the freedom to be able to praise God. Whether that means we all sit in our pews and sit still, or whether we are a bit more expressive with our body and have to move around. I don't know that I could actually give a sermon just standing here anymore. Without the freedom to move around, I think the words might stop. So I guess that might be a good reason if I'm ever going on too long, you could start pointing at the lectern, at the pulpit, and say, go there, it's time to stop, right? There's that freedom and there's that servant piece, right? To be mindful of the community, to be respectful of the community, and to know that if I'm going to talk for the next 5 hours, some people will remain here for the next 5 hours, and thus a denial of freedom is occurring as well. As a nation, as a church, as a congregation, so church meaning like bigger Christian church here in the U.S., around the world, wherever we want to speak of, we've still got some work to do. Because we know that not everybody, even during a sermon time when pretty much everyone here except for Brian and I are sitting down and being mostly attentive or completely attentive. I don't see anyone sleeping today, that's good. But we know that there are some people who come into a worship context like this and can't sit still. We know there's some people who throughout their entire lives really can't sit still. We have young folk who haven't yet learned, or who maybe never will learn, and maybe in some ways never need to learn that you worship sitting on your butt. Right? Why is it that we do it that way? I mean, I guess if worship services are going on for an hour or more, not everybody's going to want to stand that whole time. Not everybody can stand that whole time. But the same as not everybody can stand for a full hour or an hour and a half. Not everyone can sit still for that long either. And especially when you're knee to hip high, knee to waist high, maybe even a bit taller. We're growing some really tall young people these days. I met like a 6-year-old who was like this tall, and I'm like, I didn't hit that tall until I was middle school, junior high. How did that happen? They're 6. They're in early elementary school, and they're almost as tall as I am. What does it mean to be free to worship in this place if you're not able to sit still? Should they have the right to worship here? Yeah? Yeah. How do we create an atmosphere? How do we create space? How do we create opportunities? We have these lovely little tables over here with some little chairs. And I would imagine that sometimes for people sitting here looking over and seeing kids bouncing around, that could be a little bit distracting, right? Perhaps. But does that mean we don't let the kids have a space? Probably not. Not if we want a church to continue, right? Because I know there's a few people here younger than I am. That's really good, because that's not always been the case when I've been in places. But I don't think we have anyone under the age of 18 here today, do we? So 60 years from now, who's here? They are, the ones who aren't here now. They're going to magically someday say, oh, that big church on the corner, I should go check that out. Probably not. Not if they don't have experience being here in the meantime. Yeah, what does that even mean 45 years from now? It's a question I think we need to really look at and consider. And how do we know, knowing that society has changed in major ways since I was of that age, and I would guess even since the youngest of us here today have been that age, society has changed drastically. There was perhaps a sense at times when I was a kid that you are not free to make up your mind to not go to worship on Sunday morning, right? That the freedom was you will wake up and you will go to worship. You will go to church for an hour of Sunday school and 45 minutes of choir rehearsal and an hour of worship, and that's our Sunday morning, and that is what freedom looks like. It's not the way the world works today. I have a sense that even when I was a kid, there were times when people didn't see you in worship, and your folks would get a phone call the next day saying, "Hey, where were you?" Right? There was maybe a little bit of a shame element of, "I wasn't in church. Who's going to call me this week to find out why?" And maybe, what excuse can I give? Because I don't have a good reason for not being in worship, but for the fact that I'm free. We have religious freedom here. Why must I be in worship on Sunday morning, right? In my experience today, it's probably more shameful in some communities to say I get up and I go to worship every Sunday morning. And certainly to say I wear a collar and I stand up and preach the gospel almost every Sunday morning. The world has changed. So what's the future of the church look like? What's the future of the church look like when the stools on the table are still legs up and not legs down? Because they're still sitting on the table and there's no kids with us. And that goes to the question of how do we treat our people who come? And I say our people because I really believe anyone who walks in the door is one of our people, right? Whether it be Sunday morning or Wednesday or any time during the week. Anyone who goes to the gathering table and works in the garden or hangs out in the garden or maybe even takes things that doesn't belong to them from the garden. They're still part of who we are, right? Because until we are all free, none of us are free. And we're all in this together. We're all in this together. So what does freedom to worship look like? If sitting for a whole sermon isn't a possibility. What does freedom to worship look like if vocalizations just randomly occur and maybe you don't have as much control over them as it sounds like everyone here today does? I know this is a place where when the music's playing, it's okay to get up and dance if you feel like it. But while the pastor's preaching, most people probably don't want little kids running around and chasing after things. So how do we create spaces? And I know there have been some conversations about this, but how as a whole congregation do we create spaces for everyone to be engaged? For everyone to have the opportunity to be free to worship here in this place. I raise those questions, not having the answers for all of it. I've got some ideas, but they're not necessarily answers. But it's a question that this congregation and most congregations that I've ever been a part of need to think about. Unless we are an aging people and like the dinosaurs, the church is just going to die off. And the church has that freedom, right? We have the freedom to do that. We have the freedom to find different ways to worship and bring the gospel out into the world. And I'm going to end this sermon today with the question. Usually we talk about my personal freedoms. You talk about your personal freedoms. The freedom that you have to do this or that or the other. I want us also to think about what freedoms do we allow others? Whether it's in the political realm or the spiritual realm, the church realm, the gathering table or the pantry realm. How is it that we offer freedom to others to totally be who they are in the moment that they are, wherever they are, here in this place or out in the world? Knowing that others being free may not look like what it means for what I want in my freedom. How do we allow others to be free? What freedoms do we grant? Because we know as Jesus said, if the Son has set you free, you are free indeed. And if the Son has set you free, not only does that mean that you have the freedom to move forth in the world as you are, but you also have the opportunity to grant freedoms, the freedom for others to be safe in your midst, to be safe where you are, even when they are fully who they are. When the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. We have been justified by faith through grace. Faith being a free gift from God, it is ours. And through that faith, through that gift, we are free. We are justified. Christ has set us free. Christ has set us free. It is my prayer that we use the freedoms that we have to ensure that others are free as well. Thanks be to God. Amen.